Well, the Matildas are in camp in Turkey ahead of Australia's 7th successive World Cup. There are a couple of blokes who could tell you more about those 7 efforts and the players involved than anyone else. Andrew Howe and Greg Werner have just released the Encyclopedia of Matildas, and it's awesome to have Greg with us here in the studio today. Hello, Greg, and congratulations.
Thank you, Neve. It's wonderful to be here.
As far as passion projects go, this one has to be right up there. You've now released an encyclopedia of both the Socceroos and the Matildas. Can you tell us why it was so important to you and to Andrew that female players receive this recognition as well?
Well, the Encyclopedia of Socceroos was released 12 months ago I think almost to the day prior to the girls' book being released, and it was a no-brainer. You can't have a men's book out there without having a women's book that represented a game that is just growing like topsy at the moment, and actually has a history that's previously pretty much gone unrecognised.
And I love that in this book you say it tells the story of one of Australia's most loved national teams. And I think that's absolutely accurate. And we're seeing that in the passion and the enthusiasm around the build-up to this World Cup.
Absolutely. You go onto any football park anywhere in the country at the moment of a weekend, and you just see thousands and thousands of young girls who have taken up the game in the last 3-4 years based on what they've seen on television, which is something that previously they hadn't been able to do. So, yeah, it's fantastic.
You mentioned there, Greg, an unrecognised history. Why is it being unrecognised until you guys came along?
Why is women's sport being unrecognised? It's just something that the Australian press has pretty much refused to recognise. It's, whether, for whatever reason that is, I don't know. But you can go back decades, and women's sport, unless it's an Olympic event, is pretty much in the shadows. Australian women's football goes back to the 1920s. You look at the La Trobe Club from Brisbane, and they were playing and drawing huge crowds in the 1920s, just as was happening in the UK, and then it just kind of dropped off the map and really didn't surface again until the 1990s, effectively.
Which is why I think so many of the Matildas take such delight in this book. Speaking to a number of the former Matildas last week, the likes of Cheryl Salisbury, Heather Garriock, Amy Duggan, they had been at the launch of the book the night before, and they had learned things from reading their own chapters in this book. Tell us a little bit about the process of actually collating all of this information.
I've been very lucky to have been working with Australia's #1 football statistician, Andrew Howe, over the last 12 months on this little project. And Andrew's been collecting everything on the women's game for the last 20 years. And I'd basically been brought into the process because I'd had some contact with older players through my own little project, which predated the work that Andrew had been doing. So it then just became a case of linking, A, B and C to finally get to D, which, he hadn't been able to do because he didn't have those contacts.
His brain is incredible though, isn't it? In terms of stats and data on Australian football, did it just blow your mind?
Oh, constantly. But, he's been blowing my mind for years, the stuff that he's got at his fingertips. He's just collected everything, and it's just... He's a mind-boggling individual. He really is.
Better than any
man.
Internet search engine, that is for sure.
And quicker than, for the most part, too.
Is any of it on the internet? You're talking about unrecognised history. Have you had to actually knocked on people's doors and phone people up and go through their old photograph albums, basically, to get this stuff?
That was effectively the process, yes. If you go into Wikipedia for half of the people in the book, you'll find that there are no entries for them. They predated anything.
Which is a great lesson for all of us, isn't it? That it's not all on Google. You do actually have to go to your local library to find things out.
Indeed. I guess you'll find, name recognition, and that's about it. But anything beyond that was not available except via the people themselves. Unfortunately, we weren't able to track down all of the players within the time frame that we were working in. But it was an amazing 6 months.
Were there any stories in particular that surprised you that you discovered throughout that process?
I guess the classic is the 1988 tour to Taiwan for the first officially recognised FIFA tournament up there. at that point in time, the national team had officially been recognised for 9 years. So they played their first series against New Zealand in 1979, but they had played the year before as an unrecognised unit up in Taiwan once again. So yet, 9 years later, the girls that went on this tour were still sewing their own badges on, sewing their own numbers on their shirts, doing everything themselves. This is an Australian international team.
And in 1988, not a long time ago.
No. And, you think about it, at 1988, that's 60 plus years that the men's team had been going. They weren't treated like that, but the women were.
In 1988, the Socceroos beat Argentina 4-1. That's how established they were and what they were doing.
I was at that game. And it was, we were at that point in time where we could have been anything as a footballing power, but it was only in one half of the game because the other half didn't receive anything.
We're speaking to Greg Werner, co-author of Encyclopedia of Matildas on ABC Grandstand today. Chris Mitchell, Neve Owens with you. Lovely to have your company. If we do look ahead to June and July in France, what can you take from the stats, the data, the stories around this current group of Matildas in terms of how they will now translate that into results in France?
The biggest thing that we've got going for us now is that this group of players have been together for a long time. And I'm not talking about the starting 11. I'm talking about 15 players who've all got between 40 and what's Lisa up to now, 100 and whatever caps that she has.
Wait, let me flick to that page.
Have a look in the book. I'm sure you'll find the data in there somewhere. They have got a body of work behind them now and know each other's games inside out. That alone will take them a long way, but what they also have is a few youngsters that can provide some X factor that other sides would only ever dream of. I really hold Mary Fowler in high regard, having seen her in action last year. She's got X factor. She is an established 16-year-old player now. She's had a taste of international football, and I would not be surprised if she makes not one or two, but 3 or 4 appearances off the bench, in the dying moments of games to get the goal that we really need. So I would think for us, semi-finals is a pass mark.
The quality of the game, though, worldwide has risen, hasn't it? Are they aware of that enough? Has the scouting been done?
Oh, absolutely. The matches against England and France last year, I think, brought it all home to them. That French team is a real formidable force, but it has to be noted that we were in that match without 4 or 5 of our regular starters, and you cannot take that number of players out of a squad and expect to get the same result. So they're aware of what's going on in the world. The England side is a good side. The French side is a good side. The German side is a good side. The quality of women's football now, the bar has been raised dramatically in the last 5 years, I would say.
And that's without even mentioning Team USA, who will absolutely be expecting to be there at the pointy end. If you had to name your grand finalists in Lyon?
I don't know how the draw actually pans out, but it would not surprise me if it's a France-US final. But we will be there or thereabouts at that point.
Greg Werner, co-author with Andrew Howe of Encyclopedia of Matildas. Awesome reading anytime, but particularly in the lead up to what is going to be a massive month of women's football internationally as it plays out in France right through June and that first week of July. Cannot wait.